Well, thank you, everyone. Just a reminder once more, for this session, we're going to be having a conversation about energy in this room. And of course, in session room 2, a conversation about trade. But it's always encouraging when people come back to your session, so I appreciate everybody who's come to join us. I'm going to take my seat as I call up my panelists and introduce them. But perhaps to set the scene, a conversation about energy and Africa's energy future, I think, has to be framed within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly, of course, Goal 7, which is about ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. How do we get to a scenario where we power our homes, our schools, our hospitals, and our economies, remaining mindful, of course, of the need for reducing greenhouse gas emissions? And I thought, to set us off, let me give you some statistics, some information you may find useful. In the first 6 months of this year alone, more than 50% of the electricity generated in the European Union was from renewables. That's in the first 6 months of this year alone. It goes up to about 74% if you factor in nuclear as part of that mix. Globally, around the world, 30% of electricity is already from renewables. More than 1 in 5 cars sold around the world, according to the International Energy Agency, is going to be an electric vehicle. Where does that place Africa in that context? I'm thrilled to tell you that my guests who are going to be joining us, my panelists, first let me call up Andrew Middleton, who is the CEO and co-founder of GoSolr. He's been part of the electricity revolution in South Africa, and he's going to be talking to us about the difference solar power has made in the country. I've also got Salim Fakir, who is the founder and executive director of the African Climate Foundation, also a lecturer at the Nelson Mandela School of Governance at the University of Cape Town. Joining us on our panel is Peter Venn, who is also, of course, the CEO of the Seriti Group, a private renewable energy producer founded in 2021, based here in South Africa. One of the things worth noting, perhaps, is that Seriti Green received $239 million in project financing in April this year. So I'm keen to know what they're going to do about that. And perhaps the man of the hour. He beat 408 other applicants to take what some may call the poisoned chalice of energy in South Africa. He is at the helm of the Electricity Supply Commission, Eskom. Please welcome Dan Marokane. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We said at the start of this morning that this is not going to be a conference that's going to focus specifically on South African issues and South African problems, but we really want to have a continental-wide frame of reference. And so we're talking about a continent that is rapidly urbanizing, the need for electricity more urgent than ever. Yet we also know what the world, the developed world, has done in terms of making climate change a real crisis for our times. And so perhaps in beginning our conversation, let me frame your opening remarks around these two competing needs. Is it a false dichotomy? How do we navigate this landscape? And I'll start with you, Dan Marokane.
Thank you, Bongani, and good afternoon to everyone. I think for us, and we've said this repeatedly, we really see the need to navigate what we call an energy trilemma. It's got to do with the issue of energy security, the issues of energy access, affordability, and also the issue of sustainability. So we actually try to model all our solutions within this context. Of course, it varies from one continent to another, and it varies from one country to another. For a South African situation, this reality is so acute at this point in time. The debate on when to shut down coal power stations, how fast do you accelerate the renewables, how do you bring the mixture of technologies into the fold to ensure that you can have cheap, reliable electricity, at the same time moving towards your net zero targets. These are things that we continuously have to think about and make our choices very carefully within this triangle.
I must say, 100 must seem to be the magic number for you. You've been now in office for just over 100 days. We've also coincidentally had just over 100 days without load shedding. And the truth is, there is remarkable progress being made at Eskom right now.
Yeah, look, all of you know, it's always quite daunting task when you put plans down. And I've heard this, things said repeatedly about us as South Africans. We are very good in planning, very poor in execution. So every time you have plans, we start panicking about the risk associated with realizing the plans and the plans' outcome as anticipated. We've been down this path as Eskom since last year, March. I think that's the time when the board really worked with the management teams to start rethinking the approach towards increasing reliability of the power plants. What was required, of course, is very disciplined execution, focus on multiple streams at a time, collaboration with others, government, NICOM, the private sectors come to the party, but you need to constantly stay at it, and you need to be able to do some course corrections when things are not coming okay. You need to engage on all fronts and have that discipline to deliver. What you're seeing is a confluence of all those interventions coming to the party, and it needs to be sustained. Previously, attempts were made at solving this problem, but when you do it in very discrete portions, you're not going to get a sustainable solution. And we're quite lucky that all of these aspects are working well. We need to maintain that momentum. What's good is that the results as observed also give you confidence, and people can see what good looks like. They start believing in themselves, and in the end to deliver more. Yeah.
Andrew, it's undeniable solar has been a huge part of alleviating the electricity crisis. Perhaps give us a broad picture and then maybe get into the details of how GoSolr has played a pivotal part in that space.
Great, thanks Bongani, and good afternoon to everyone. So, look, I think the last 2 or 3 years where at least the electricity crisis has really started to accelerate. I think we've had load shedding for 16 years, but I think really, if we're honest, the last 2 or 3 years have been really painful. And that's obviously been very difficult on most industries, but I'd say one positive is that it has accelerated the independent power producer industry, and including solar and other technologies. So it's helped get us closer to some of those global benchmarks. And I think it really has started to take some of the pressure off Eskom, because that's really what we've aimed to do, and other industry players have aimed to do. We often get asked, are we sad that load shedding has stopped for 100 days? I always laugh at that. I said that you couldn't be further from the truth. The solar industry is not about load shedding. It's actually been about being part of a sustainable energy mix with Eskom. But I think the data that we've seen, the industry together, has built, of rooftop solar at least 5.5 gigawatts. And you can see that with the reduction in demand and the pressure that hopefully we're taking off Eskom, so that the grid and the emergency reserves can be replenished and we can get through those peak times. We also have batteries in all of our systems, so that helps also with the peaks. So they really need to work together. I think it's a confluence of, we've got an industry, we've got a coal power mix, and we have to look after that, and we have to transition, but it can't just accelerate overnight. That's not sustainable. So yeah. I think what we've tried to do at GoSolr in particular, so the solar industry was growing well before we got there. I think the area we've specifically tried to identify is the residential. That was an area where nobody seemed to want to go. it was all very much the big projects and the commercial industrial and the utility scale, and we were very happy to play the role of the last mile direct to the consumer. So we're still in the smallest part of the solar industry, but I think it's an important one, and it's one that households are grateful for. So what we've tried to do is make this technology accessible and be part of a sustainable mix.
Salim, Andrew talks about solar being part of the sustainable energy mix. Tell me about the work the African Climate Foundation is doing, and of course what these solutions mean for the continent at large.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure being here. I just want to maybe describe the African Climate Foundation. It's a philanthropy established about 4 years ago, and we a pool fund for endowments both from the continent and outside. We work on climate and development issues. That's our primary focus, and there are two strands. The first is really to design grant investments, because they are there to lay the foundation for investments, new investments in both climate, what we call climate investments, that could cover generation technology, basically clean, electric vehicles, storage, green industrial development, etc. And the second part is more important as well, is climate vulnerability in key economic sectors like agriculture, where our business is really to try to protect the long-term viability and investment potential of those industries, because agriculture is the biggest segment of the continent. The second part, which most people forget, and is a topic maybe going to be picked up in the session outside, is the vulnerabilities that countries like South Africa will face due to carbon border tax adjustments going into the future. Many people didn't believe this is going to happen. It's going to become real, and we're seeing that in the EU, but the US is considering it, UK, Canada, all our major trading partners, possibly China will also be looking at that. So we have to be wary that the status quo will have to be realigned, reorientated. Of course, there's a whole geopolitics about that. But on the climate investments, I don't want to focus just on renewables, but the purpose of electrification, which is really about diversifying resource-intense economies across the continent. So we work, for example, not only in South Africa, work very extensively on the JET-P, for example. But in Namibia, we very focused on green hydrogen. In Nigeria, we worked with the investment authority there to set up a renewables fund. In Senegal, we're working with the sovereign fund there, FONSIS, to look at a renewables energy and efficiency fund. Malawi, we're working with the government. We just signed an MOU with them to look at fiscal resilience and its response to climate risk. So these are the type of work we do. We're not a normal type of climate philanthropy, but we are very much about using our grants in a very strategic way to create momentum behind new investments.
How would you even define climate philanthropy?
Different regions in the world would look at it in a very different way. What we are trying to use philanthropy, which is basically charitable grants, although I don't like calling it charity, designed to create groundwork in many countries where a lot of what we're talking about here is unblocking new investments. So our strategy is about investment platforms. So that's the language we use internally within ACF. So an investment platform is a coordination of political desire, ambition in whatever you want to set the ambition, creating the technical capacity for governments to be able to do that, identifying the sources of funding that can come on the back of a philanthropic support, and then an investment portfolio that needs to be bankable, where it could attract both public funds and private. But just to say very clearly, I think we still have a lot of challenges around cost of capital on the continent, and that is something I hope we can
Yeah.
we can also talk about. Thanks.
Peter, Venn, you and I chatted briefly outside, but let's talk about what Seriti Green is doing as a company that specializes in developing and operating these large-scale projects, including, of course, renewable energy solutions. Just talk to me broadly about how you are involved in that space.
Yeah, thanks, Bongani, and good afternoon. Well, firstly, the vision of the Seriti Group as being Eskom's largest or second largest coal supplier, depending on the month. One hats have to go off to Mike Tekke and Doug Gain as the founders of Seriti with regards to their vision in moving into renewables. And, it was Standard Bank that brought Seriti, the coal company, and Windlab, the renewable energy company, together and created Seriti Green circa 18 months ago. I think what we're really specializing in is bringing the different components of the mineral rights that's required, the land access, access to the demand for electricity, and then obviously the capital. So the small first phase was 5 billion rand. Thank you, Standard Bank. So that 5 billion rand has gone to build 25 turbines plus a gigawatts worth of grid infrastructure. Thank you, Dan. So we're building out a complex in Mpumalanga. When built, will be 3.5 gigawatts, which in renewables terms is probably 2 stages of load shedding, alleviation. But that's going to take 10 years, and that's 75 billion rand, right? So there's a lot of moving pieces that come together. As the industry has moved from the coastal Cape areas now to the inland areas to leverage the transmission grid that Eskom has invested in over decades, so the challenges of developing large-scale renewable energy projects have changed, right? So it's far more about land tenure, mineral rights, and then most importantly, bringing the community along. If you look at the just energy transition, in the rest of the world, they focus on the ET, energy transition. In South Africa, we need to focus on the just part, right? There are hundreds of thousands of jobs in Mpumalanga, the energy heartland of South Africa, that if you shut down those coal stations magically tomorrow, those people wouldn't have work. And for us, it's about focusing on the just part. And there is no ways that a renewables plant will be able to absorb a coal plant shutting down. The numbers are just 1,000 people in a coal mine versus 50 people on an operating wind farm. So it's about working with all stakeholders to grow the economy. And we have a short window between now and 2030, where my expectation about 250 billion rand is going to be spent on renewables between now and 2030 in South Africa, to get the message across that it's not renewables or coal, it's renewables and coal. And we have this 7 years to really drive this message home. Thank you. And we need to work as society and not just put capitalism and IRR returns at the front. We need to work as society and not also be doing little pockets of work, but bring it all together to focus on the just part of the jet.
It is an energy mix after all, is it not? Dan, somebody mentioned just the other day about Komati Port as an example. That was decommissioned, I think, 2010. At least that was when that was signed. And the conversation about the just energy transition is something that has gained momentum significantly after that. What lessons have been learned in line with what Peter has also just said?
Yeah, look, Komati Power Station was decommissioned 2 years ago. I've actually been to the site twice since I joined the company 4 months ago. Just the other day, we took the executive directors of the World Bank through to Komati because we wanted them to have a first-hand experience of what can go wrong if you don't do the planning adequately. We are finding ourselves in a space where we almost have to play catch-up. The site is off now, it's not producing any power. A lot of opportunities for repurposing and repowering. When you look at it, these are the activities that needed to have been done upfront to enable the transition, because the impact of shutting down that station goes beyond the power station perimeter. It is the community. It is the social fabric that is affected by that. It's about the coal mining industry that is also affected. We live in a country where unemployment is too high, If you look at the concentration of this power station in one municipal district, you literally create an atomic bomb scenario in terms of social discord. What we're doing now is to play catch up. So we will have a battery storage project out at Komati, and a wind farm also in the mix. But we need to avoid going through this route again for the next power stations. And it is on this basis, Bongani, that we took a decision, and we are very happy that Cabinet supported this approach to delay the shutdown of those stations to no earlier than 2030. Between now and then, we'll of course allow ourselves to have a firm, reliable recovery of our generation fleet. We'll also allow renewable projects that are under execution to come to operationalization. We can manage the energy security, the supply-demand gap much more better. But more importantly, we'll invest time and energy into establishing the repurposing and repowering activities in those communities. This is a big lesson that we have to take on. If we don't do this, we run the risk of polarizing this discussion around renewables or coal. The energy mix going forward requires all, but we need to do it in a manner that is at the pace that is appropriate for the economy that we have. Yeah.
Just talk to me about some of the stories that emerged in the lessons that you are talking about, and I'm keen to hear what the response of the World Bank executives was when they met with the people behind the statistics.
Yeah, look, and in this regard, we have fantastic support from the local municipality and leadership of the society. They engage themselves directly. We allow civil society institutions to speak directly to the World Bank. They don't need our permission. They can actually translate their experiences on the ground and their fears in manners that are beyond our own articulation. There is now no confusion about this. All of us are aligned that we should not repeat Komati. It is within this context that even the approach that we're taking now, and I know that nobody has come out publicly to indicate that they are comfortable with it, but we've had no resistance. We've met with all the IPG members, those who are providing the funding. We've explained our rationale of going this way. They all understood it. They've asked for openness, transparency as we go forward. That we'll provide. But everybody recognizes that on the one hand, you have to solve the issues of transition. On the other, you have to have a very responsible and calculated way of bringing society along, especially in our environment here.
Salim, let me bring you then into the conversation again. How do businesses leverage renewable energy to mitigate the impact of climate change, whilst at the same time ensuring no one gets left behind, that there is economic growth?
So there are different reasons why business would want to engage in sourcing new sources of energy. Probably like 5 things I could list. The first is, of course, companies are concerned about energy security in the light of the fact that we had load shedding disruption, although 100 days have gone without any load shedding. So there's a bit of a hedging that needs to be done. Secondly, globally, most companies, particularly financial institutions, if you look at the big private equity firms and so on, have tried to put a marker on their own ESG goals. So there's a bit of a market differentiation. Thirdly, there's opportunities to diversify investment portfolios. Depends who you are. So if you're wanting to diversify your investment portfolio, you invest in new technology with better returns, if that's possible. The fourth is steel industries or cement companies are faced with carbon border tax adjustments, so they also have to hedge against penalties. And the last is security of price. If it's okay to have low cost generation, that doesn't mean the consumer will get the benefit of it. So certain companies are recognizing that there's a particular cost structure. You have to pay for transmission, grid connection. There's losses in the system. the full cost is often not. Eskom is now going to look at a 44% tariff. I don't know if they've approved it.
I don't know where you get that from.
Yeah. It's in the newspaper. But I'm just painting the reality of your utilities. Yeah. And utilities then sell on to municipalities. They have a markup. Most municipalities are highly dependent on the sales of electricity. Big companies are trying to hedge, households are trying to hedge against future cost. Those are the reasons why.
Andrew,
it's never just an environmental issue, by the way. Yeah.
Let's talk about access and affordability. We've also got to think around particularly rural communities, off-the-grid communities. How do we ensure affordable access for them?
Yeah, no, it's very important, Bongani. And one thing I'd say is prior to the subscription solar model really taking off the last few years, there was no access at all to most households. It was really a wealthy person, a wealthy household's product, and it had reliability issues and a whole bunch of scale challenges. So I think already the solar industry's managed to find at least the middle income households with a competitive product that gives them a lot of benefits. But we're still not there in terms of being able to offer solutions to every household, and that's really the vision is, solar in every home. I think we should all have that vision. Within our energy mix, we've got lovely sun in the country, so there's no reason why we shouldn't all use that roof space. I think a couple of drivers of the access there. I think we need technology advancements to continue as they are. I think we're very, very close to seeing prices get to the level where we can put quality solutions into most households in the country. I think we need sensible regulations. I think well publicized. There's just been a very, it's been a long time in the making, but a surprise, I suppose, import tariff on solar panels, which doesn't help bring down the cost and the accessibility. And then also,
what about the argument, though, of boosting local manufacturing?
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely why import tariffs sit there, and there is a local manufacturer. Unfortunately, the global scale of solar panel production makes it very difficult to compete locally, even with that tariff. I think I won't speak for the local manufacturer, but even they indicated in the public that tariff alone won't be enough to make them competitive. But all it does is increase the costs and makes it less and less accessible for every household. I think another important part is partnerships. Partnerships that can help you lower the cost of getting into those communities. I think community, Peter's touched on, is really important. I think often companies take for granted what they do in a metro. They can just replicate that in a rural community. That's not the way that you can really do something meaningful and sustainable. So that's quite important. I think partnering with philanthropy would be very important as well. I think sometimes, for instance, giving access to credit for some of those households that can't necessarily pass certain vetting criteria that companies get from their funders. I think potentially philanthropy could be used to supplement that or support that. Obviously, the question I always have is you want to make sure that if philanthropy is coming in to create some enhancement or subsidy, you've got to make sure that it can be sustainable and can stand alone without that, because what you don't want is to do something and then the philanthropy isn't there in the future and then it doesn't work. So there's lots of things you can do there. But yeah, I think partnerships and community engagement and technology advancements are the best opportunity we can get to get solar everywhere. One last point is the huge benefit that decentralized energy like rooftop solar has is that it's consumed on site. It's not reliant on grid infrastructure, which is a limiting factor around the world, not just on the African continent, but around the world. Access to the grid is becoming more and more difficult, and the investment required to upgrade it is huge. I think there's some big numbers that have been quoted from Eskom. So in rural communities where there isn't that grid infrastructure, producing power on site and using it on site has a huge benefit.
And of course, not just beyond philanthropy, there's a room full of bankers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Peter, let me come back to you now, and let's talk about two things, perhaps key drivers and obstacles in terms of not only developing but implementing large-scale renewable projects in South Africa and across the continent.
Thank you. Bongani, when I went to university, privileged to do so, I never thought I'd use the words policy certainty in my life. And all I ever say is policy certainty, and policy certainty. And I want to thank the South African government. About 2.5 years ago, they stepped out of the way. So we now have what's called private power. Anybody can create an energy plant and compete with Eskom and sell to anybody in the country. So, we are selling our first plant 500 gigawatt hours to a mining group, the coal mining group, right? And that allows us to do private investment. And so that was probably the biggest change in the South African energy market since the REAP program started in 2011. Right, so that was a big benefit. I think one of our biggest challenges is the long-term nature of this. Due to the way the funding is structured, correctly so, due to the fact that we need low tariffs, which we all want, the debt is very long-term in nature. 15, 17, 20, 22 years of debt. But to go alongside that, you need offtake that is 15, 17, 20, correct? Bankers out there. So you need long-term contracts. And how long is a politician's term? 4 years, 5 years. I sat with the Minister of Energy from Uganda. She said, Peter, you do not understand. If next year I sign a PPA for a cheaper price than last year, I lose my job, not you. Right? So we've had this learning curve on electricity. The COVID has turned the corner for us. We will no longer see 34 cents, sorry Dan, which was round 5 wind energy. The wind and solar prices are 80 to 1 rand. That's the price. And so it's turned that corner. We have this problem with batteries. Batteries come down in price 25% a year. And there's going to be governance issues when you buy batteries this year for 50 cents, but next year for 40 cents. So those are some of the challenges. So there's a lot of governmental education that is required. There is no lack of funding. Let me be clear. There is no lack of funding. But where we are developing and wanting to build in Kenya and Tanzania, the governments are not willing to commit to buy the electricity for 15 or 20 years. And that's where I'm really hopeful around the Southern African power pool, the East African power pool, so that we can spread that risk of purchase of electricity across the region. Next year, or the year after, we'll have a line that connects Zambia to Tanzania, and technically it'll be possible to sell an electron from Cape Town to Cairo. So these are some of the benefits that are well, and I've mentioned the community issues. So those are my points on that.
Dan, it's easy to make conversations about Eskom around load shedding, but of course we know there are other business challenges the utility faces, from operational inefficiencies, financial instability. How are you making sure that you're addressing all of these challenges to stabilize Eskom beyond just the rest of us seeing the lights on?
And Bongani, that's really the challenge that load shedding left the organization with. The industry is transforming very rapidly. Load shedding kept the business inward looking, whilst everybody around Eskom was essentially taking advantage of the changes that are taking place. What we're trying to do now is to focus on fixing the core of our business, which is essentially our operational recovery from a performance perspective, as you see through our generation recovery plan. At the same time, that headroom allows us to really look ahead and think about how this business needs to look like for the next 100 years. Eskom is actually 101 years old, and we need to be thinking about how it will look like in this ever-changing electricity supply space. We have said it, that whilst we're delaying the decommissioning of the coal-fired power stations to find that holistic solution, we're also going to immediately start with the construction of our own renewable portfolio. We do have some renewables in our portfolio. We have clean energy through our nuclear operation outside Cape Town here. We have great capabilities in the 24,000 technical skills that we have in the business. We have land adjacent to our own coal stations in Mpumalanga. We have access to the grid. We are open to partnerships. We have A great appetite displayed already by others to fund some of these projects. We can direct the funds that are available for transition to ensure that we cushion the communities that are going to be affected by this, and also start building up a portfolio that replaces as the coal stations get to the end. So we're focusing on the next Eskom, and we have space to do so because we're getting on top of our operational performance. So we're going to stay down this course as we redefine that business. You know, our distribution business is going to go through its unbundling process. We have just launched our NTCSA, the transmission company that is independent, and the chairperson is here. We're going to now aggressively look at the business offerings within our distribution business. There's a lot of stuff that we can do in that space. And I was joking with Andrew before that maybe we need to buy him so we can scale up the ability to roll out PVs at the residential areas. We need to think about stratifying our customers going forward. There's a space for renewables and a space for baseload. We need not forget that this country requires a very stable baseload for us to be able to drive industrialization. And for that, our coal fleet remains very relevant, and any other that will be adding up for baseload going forth here.
How critical, though, is that going to be for, shall we call it a repositioning of Eskom, modernizing the grid around the imperative of renewables?
Yeah, look, it's a very big issue. You guys left Priscilla. She was here in the morning to talk about it. I shouldn't be talking about her business now. But it's known that we need to add some 14,000 kilometers of grid capacity for every year for the next 10 years, so we can really tap into the renewable capacity that is in the country. We are now, through the team, focusing on how do we front load that. How do we create agility within that business for us to be able to bring to the party additional electrons to the grid so we can really get the appropriate cushion from an energy security point of view. So that team will come out at the right time and indicate the nuances in terms of how to accelerate that construction, but also how to create space for private partnerships that are required to bring the capital in that area.
Andrew, is there still more space for stimulation? I mean, we've mentioned the tariff issue. I imagine the regulatory environment is still one that's tricky to navigate.
It is, and I mean, I think there's lots of opportunity for the right policy moves here. So I think tariff is the big topic now, tariff reform. I think the tariffs do need to be reformed. There's definitely a mismatch between the cost of connecting to the grid and the variable cost of power, and that changes over time. And I think it's long overdue. So we think we're very supportive of tariff reform that can make sure that Eskom and the grid, the value of the grid is fairly valued, and then of course the variable cost of generating power with the adequate mix. I think what we just want to caution is if we get that wrong, and it takes time, in many developed countries it takes a long time for tariff reform. If we get that wrong and we create the wrong incentives, then it can have a whole bunch of unintended consequences for the industry as well as Eskom.
All right, I'm not going to hog the conversation. I would imagine there may be questions from the floor, and we've certainly got one here. I wonder if we have that roving mic. We've got a question. If I can ask you to just put your hand up so we can see. There we go.
Thank you, Bongani. Thank you, Standard Bank, for this event. With the expertise on the floor, I'd really like to know from an industry point of view what we can bank on from a reliability of energy going forward and what that mix looks like. Because we don't want to be in a situation where we're creating a whole lot of infrastructure that becomes redundant because now we have reliable energy. Thank you.
Who wants to take that?
I'll start with a comment. One needs to get all the players in the room and kind of map out a macro view forward, because as Andrew pointed out, we have the potential of becoming 90% solar and 10% the rest, and that leaves no generation in the peaks and the off-peak areas, right? If you look at what's happened in the west coast of Australia, if you look at what's happening in California, electricity is free in the middle of the day. right? And that's going to lead to challenges. So one of the biggest reforms following on here is around changing the tariff to a time of use tariff, like you see in France, so that you don't turn your dishwasher on at 6 p.m. There is no negative incentive for me not to plug my car in at 6 p.m. when I get home. It takes 2 or 3 extra button pushes for it to charge at 3 in the morning, but I pay the same whether I charge it at 6 p.m. or I charge it at 3 a.m. But you need to have an incentive that the moment I charge my car in peak, I am now paying 4 times the price. But the question here to Eskom is, how do we, particularly with the municipalities, push down time of use to us as consumers and small businesses? You know, it's not about the big businesses. They're there already. But the consumers need to get to this, and then that drives his next stage of battery sales, right? Dan, maybe you can comment on that.
I mean, there was an attempt to review the tariff model in the last 18 months. It's not gone very well, but we're going to go back to it. We have an industry that is undergoing rapid reformation here, but the tariff structures are still old, so we need to revisit that. I had a conversation with a gentleman yesterday who told me that I don't need Eskom's power between 8 and 4 in the afternoon. I said, okay. And who supplies you between 4 and 6 in the morning? He says, no, it's Eskom, so I need to find a tariff for you. For keeping that insurance for you, I need to find a tariff for you. So there will be some tariff reforms, and those need to start talking to the aspirations that we have as a country from an energy security perspective. But Bongani, let me address this question holistically. What we're solving for here and now is a solution for adequate electricity for South Africa and beyond. We have to think about the region. So the notion that there'll be a lot of excess electricity that is stranded is really not true. The region is still deficit in terms of electricity supply, and the connectivity that he's referring to is important because it allows electrons to move in all directions across the region, and we can stimulate economic activities. We need to start thinking about that. We may be feeling the pain now, it's localized, but it shouldn't make us take our eye off the ball in as far as ensuring that there's adequate energy security across the region. That way you can start stimulating economic activities. And certainly as Eskom, we're looking beyond solving load shedding. We have to solve load shedding at home, but we need to get back and play in the region where we were playing before. Actively to stimulate economic activities. And we have maintained those relationships. We are very alive to the projects and potential that is in Mozambique. We continue to look what is north of us. In the process, we find solution for everyone around us. So if we get to a point where there's enough power at home from whatever technologies, we have to be thinking about how we get that power to the other countries around us.
All right. Of course, Chair.
Sorry. 2 questions. First of all, one of the challenges you've spoken about is around access and affordability. I'm still trying to work in my mind, how do we accelerate the affordability question, particularly to the renewables teams? Do we see an environment where the industry will be totally liberalized and the sharing of risks is balanced? And how soon can we get there? The second question is, we're speaking a lot about just energy transition. I remain concerned that the intangibles plans on the ground as an industry to drive real employment, social inclusion at a fast pace, leveraging the infrastructure investments we're making. What are your thoughts on that?
Leave no one behind, essentially. Salim?
No, I want to try to sort of get us away from being too focused on the technology, but really the goals of the whole economy approach, which is basically what are the goals we're setting for our economy? Because that's an important debate. What is the growth that we're looking for? What are the social goals we're setting for ourselves, which includes environmental and so on? And the issue that's most important, also being discussed that side, is the global competitiveness of South Africa. That ought to give us a sense of what is the most fastest route to reliability terms of energy security and meeting those objectives, which includes affordability, etc. And the economy's growth rate should be able to pay for the technologies that we adopt. What we should avoid is, in my view, levels of capital intensity that makes it unaffordable for us to be able to pay off any forms of debt or any financing cost in the future, because it's always about interest rate versus growth, right? So that equation, and that's a problem in most parts of the continent as well, is that people forget about the growth rate they need to achieve. Now that requires coordination, organization, because climate issues are no longer standalone issues, neither energy. They're interlinked with trade, they're interlinked with the kinds of technology adoption strategy you pursue, what is the co-benefits you want out of it. Energy security is crucial, energy access, affordability. There's the decarbonization goal, we can't escape that. And then there's a whole question around foreign diplomacy, because it's a fragmented trade and geopolitical space. It's not easy now to, for example, if we keep buying, we have to buy from China. They have 80% production on PVs, etc. But our other trade partners might view it in a very negative way. South Africa is an industrial economy. We've been on a decline. In fact, Morocco is leading now in terms of, in a very short space, their industrial capability is growing very fast. We have to look at this in a bigger picture. This entire narrow focus on energy is not useful without a broader discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, to address the affordability matter, Eskom is doing a very good piece of work with regards to creating a liquid wholesale market, or a transmission company, right? And the public date, the date they've announced is 2031. So think of the JSE for electricity, right? So all electricity will be sold into the wholesale market and bought from the wholesale market. And, if we can stick to 2031, if we can make that 2029, that is really the game changer in the country, because it allows the market to play out. It allows the market to set the price between buyer and seller. One of the companies I respect the most in the electricity game is in the east coast of Australia, and they have connected many pool filters. And when the price of electricity is high, they can turn off pool filters, and they provide a virtual power station into the market at a very high price. So you're happy to have the inconvenience of your pool not being cleaned if you're getting a kickback. Last year, Canberra citizens, ACT citizens in Australia, got a check in the post because of the price of electricity had come down, because they are 100% renewable. Now, to your point, they connected to a broader integrated grid, so they can be 100% renewable, but checks were sent in the post to the citizens of the ACT to say thank you for supporting our renewable energy program. So the thing that we need to do as an industry is really get this wholesale market in place, get the rules defined, test it, make sure it works, make sure the finances, make sure it's liquid, so that by 2029, 2031, we have a wholesale market, and then it's free to trade, and then we'll see where the chips lie.
Does anyone want to pick up the other part of the question around commitments and measurables as far as the just energy transition is concerned?
I can tell you what we're doing on our side. And as I said, for Komati, we're playing catch-up. We have now an implementation agent that is taking through a number of initiatives for repurposing through business case development, because we want to actually establish the extent of funds diversions towards supporting those vis-a-vis pumping it into the projects themselves. And you need to look at this in contrast to the economic activity that is stopped with the discontinuation of the power stations. We will also be going out public very soon to share our social impact assessments, and we do so knowing that the picture that will emerge out of that is not a pretty one, but we put it up there so that we can actually test ourselves in terms of our determination to alleviating the pain that will come out of this. And we can all respond towards that in a very measured and very clear way to do so. I think if we do that, we'll stand a better chance of ensuring that we can bring in the justness in the transition that is required here.
Any other questions? We've got one there. We'll take one here and then maybe at the back.
So, some comments, and the reason for the comments is because you don't have anybody representing coal there. So South Africa's problem is not load shedding. Our problem is unemployment. We got like more than 30% unemployed people and 65 to 70% unemployment amongst youth. So if we don't have power and cheap power, we won't be able to employ more people. Because I don't know if you guys know, but like there's a ferromanganese plant that was built by Orm and Sako family in Malaysia. It was not built in South Africa because we didn't have power, cheap power in South Africa. So if we don't get power sorted, then we deal with the desserts. Like we need main course. We don't need dessert now. So base load is our main course. We're talking about dessert, salad, and maybe sushi, but people are hungry. Okay. Second thing is, if you look at Saudi Arabia, they produce 10 million barrels a day, right, of oil. Can anybody say Saudi Arabia stop extracting oil? No. Why? What will be the response? That's their bread and butter. But some people are telling us we should stop coal mining in this country. We should stop burning coal. What are we going to burn? I mean, we don't have gas. They stop us exploring gas in the East Coast. They stopped us exploring gas in Karoo. So what are we going to burn? We're going to burn gas from Mozambique, Tanzania, or any other parts of the world, which is going to dollarize the economy. South Africa is an island when it comes to grid. We don't have other countries that's producing power. We've got some coming from Mozambique, but we've got Botswana, Zimbabwe, Namibia. They're not producing power. We are not Denmark. We're not living in Denmark, getting power from other European countries. So every country has its own circumstances, and South Africa's circumstances, we need to mine coal. And we need to be liberated from being the guinea pig of some countries and some climate fundamentalists. That's critical. So renewables are complementary to coal or base load, and renewable companies actually should support coal mining in South Africa, because without coal, they can't do anything. And my question is, before my last comment, this country saw a minister and an Eskom CEO celebrating a closure of a coal-fired power station. They celebrated it. While they were negotiating with a company called Car Power Ships, they were trying to buy power from a floating vessel, which is wrong, and like Dan mentioned, that now they can't fix it, they just need to carry on with the catch-up project. So my question is to Dan. First of all, I would like to thank him because he brought some sanity to Eskom. They decided to burn coal. Okay, because the previous guy, which was a lawyer running Eskom, which was, I think, the first in the world, a lawyer appointed running. Imagine, Sim, if a lawyer runs Standard Bank. Imagine what happened. I checked his CV. So the question is this. Now, he stopped load shedding.
Okay.
For the last, say, 100 days, we don't have load shedding. But then he's got some old coal-fired power stations. What's going to happen next? So when Grootvlei is really out of service, or Hendrina or Arnold, what's going to happen? Would you guys discuss with the government or the shareholder, tell them, listen, we need to do something with the private sector, or are you guys going to build power stations like you did Medupi and Kusile, which was not a great success because it took very long and it was very expensive. So what is the plan? Thank you.
All right. Stop talking salads and dessert when people are hungry.
Yeah. Look, I think one of the things that I'm really hoping this time we get right as a country is finality on our integrated resource plan. There's been a lot of input provided from all sectors in as far as how the energy mix for the country needs to look like going forward. And Fuslat is correct. the base load remains a critical component of our energy security going forward. We have power stations that are at different stages of their lives. There are a number of stations that still have in excess of 10 to 15 years of life left on them, besides Midupi and Kusile. We have a responsibility, and this I've said to my RT&D team, that ours is to invest every little cent we have in understanding technologies that can allow us to run the stations longer and run them in a responsible manner from an emissions perspective. This is happening across the world. What we didn't do well before was to stop looking in one direction in terms of where solutions lie. And my teams are going in and out of the East to go look at what technologies can be brought back home for us to remain responsible down that path. We, of course, are also focusing on other baseload. The approach that's been taken now with regards to gas to power needs some adjustments to ensure that it's not really used up for picking purposes only. That will also address a bigger problem in the country in as far as gas solution is required. But you'll also know that Eskom is anchored in the government's plans for new nuclear. And yes, the GNU will find its feet. Policy positions will be articulated very soon. This is an area that we are capable of operating based on our 40-year history down here in Cape Town. So baseload will remain critical. Adoption of technologies to ensure that you can have extended use of coal needs to be something that we prioritize, given the significance of coal in terms of our ecosystem. Yeah.
But no new coal power stations?
It's not on the table as it is, yeah. It's not on the table.
All right, we had a question right there at the back. We've got the mic.
Thank you, Bongani. Charles Goes from ACES Group. Dan, a question to you is, when we look at renewable energy, one of the important things is that wherever that energy is generated, whether it be on a rooftop through GoSolr or anybody else, or even at a renewable section, it needs the grid to be transmitted to its end user. And I think that with the new developments in the transmission power company, I hope that we will be able to address those. The one sector that we're not addressing, in my opinion, is that when we start talking wheeling, and we need to wheel energy across the grid, the big stumbling block is the municipalities. Yeah. The municipalities are in massive debt to Eskom, and we cannot blame Eskom for not wanting to be part of a transaction where energy is being sold into those municipalities through wheeling. So we see very good developments with wheeling with Eskom, and we thank you for that. There's great progress in wheeling transactions in South Africa with Eskom and Eskom clients. The big stumbling block at the moment is the municipalities, and I would like to hear if there's any plan in how we resolve that going forward.
I thought I heard you say that Eskom does not want to be party to the transactions with municipalities, and you want the CEO of Eskom to talk about municipality issues now. On a serious note, the whole municipality electricity supply and infrastructure issues needs to be attended to. We've come out very clearly ourselves that part of the issues relating to non-payment has got to do with just the whole fabric of how that system is set up. Our ability to take advantage of self-generation, the move from consumers to prosumers, is dependent on municipality infrastructure. The management of the electricity business within municipalities require attention. We want that to be attended to so that we can get paid, but beyond that, we should actually think about the need to have that fixed so that consumers can actually experience the use of electricity and access to electricity. We've argued that in the same vein as we've put a lot of energy in driving for EAF and generation performance, we now need to turn our attention to solving reticulation at the municipality level. And I'm hoping that this will be one of the key focal points for the new minister. He has said so, or the minister in the new administration. He has said so, and we are ready to engage because there's a lot of things that are not sustainable in that space. When we look into distribution business going forward, we also have some selfish interest in terms of trying to get the municipalities to be functional, so we can really enable taking advantage of the reforms in the sector throughout the municipality space as well. So, look, we can only continue to work in that space. Some reforms working there, but let's hope that sooner than later there'll be clarity, because for now, the municipality remains and provides or represents a discontinuity in terms of energy flow. Yeah.
I'll let you, Dan, have the last word on this because we've run out of time. I think it's critical for every South African to support the work that Eskom does. But equally, you can't do it alone. And as part of your leadership team, your leadership strategy, what are some of the key performance indicators you are going to be driving to make sure that what we've seen in these last 100 days, but also to drive the critical changes that are needed for Eskom's sustainability?
Look, we've said that we want to ensure we get to an AF of 70%. That provides us a very stable platform from a base load perspective. So we need to really have those stations being dependable. This is the one part that is obvious, and the South Africans should look out for that and hold us accountable. The second part is how we responsibly transitioning ourselves. We'll build up our own fleet. As I said, from a renewable perspective, we have to do all that we need to do, even from a base load perspective, and the jury's still out as to the role of nuclear in that space. We believe is an important and integral part of our energy mix going forward. We have to continue to invest, and this I think we have not done very well. We have to invest into looking into technologies that allows us a continued use of coal in a responsible manner. We're playing catch up also in that space, and I'm hoping that we can have some breakthroughs, because there's not a lot to reinvent. It's actually looking at what others have done and being able to modify it for our own use. So these are the key aspects that we need to deal with. Of course, we need to also get off from dependency on the fiscals. There's a big debate that's going to come around the appropriate pricing for electricity and the appropriate structures for tariffs. We need to play an enabling role through NTCSA. And once we have this well balanced, hopefully we can get the economy and the region's economy back on its path. Yeah.
All right, I think it's a good word to leave it on. Thank you very much to everyone on the panel. Thank you for your attention. We will have a quick networking break, and then there'll be 2 other sessions. Following that, one on agriculture in the other room, and then of course we'll have Craig's one on family-owned businesses in this one. Thank you.